Hey everyone, it's 2 minutes to review. It's Matt.
And it's Zach.
Here we are, the longest album review in under 2 minutes for one of the biggest albums to hit 2023. You click the picture, you've clearly seen it. If you've been on Instagram or anywhere that you're following Metallica, you know the new album, 72 Seasons, is now officially out.
Yeah. The moment we've been waiting for. I mean, it feels like forever since we've been waiting for this album, although it's really only been since November. If you recall, we were so excited when Metallica announced the album that we even did a whole Am I Missing Something episode just talking about how will there ever be a band to match the level of popularity and the type of excitement that they can generate just from announcing a new album or a new song or even a tour. To say that Metallica is the biggest rock band still, not just metal, but rock band, is an understatement. And then here we are with technically album number 11. Here we are with what might be, dare I say, Metallica's first concept album. For those of you who are not necessarily familiar, James explained that this whole album is really, or that's at least the title, is about how within the first 18 years of your life, you've lived through 72 seasons. And those seasons really end up, for better or worse, shaping you for who you end up becoming. And basically, highlighting how this album's him reflecting on whether or not you can change, that you can overcome the bad things that you experience, whether they're really even that bad. It's a concept album for Metallica. So, it's a cool concept, but do Metallica pull it off? Is this a home run or is this a strikeout? Depending on how big of a Metallica fan you are, or depending on when you love the band, they've had a lot of strikeouts. But yeah, I mean, here we are. And it's also kind of a fitting that Metallica come out of an album this year, considering that this year, the year of 2023, marks a lot of special milestone anniversaries for some albums, both good and bad, which I kind of hinted at. But we'll get more into that a little later. But first, a shameless plug. You want to support Matt and I to do more of these silly little podcast episodes? Go to our Linktree page, linktree or tr.ee/Epic Footnote, where you can actually not only find all of our episodes on any streaming platform that you can imagine, but also a link to our web store where you can buy Epic Footnote t-shirts, hats, coffee mugs, hoodies. It's a way to even just support us and also let your friends know, hey, I like podcasts, and this is a pretty cool one. Be a human billboard for us. And we thank you in advance for doing that.
We really, really appreciate that.
So, Matt.
So, Zach.
I'm actually going to be a gentleman this time.
You want me to go first?
I'm going to let you go first, sir.
All right. Let's do it.
You ready?
Yep.
3, 2, 1. Give me fuel, give me fire, give me the out.
So, after thinking long and hard about this, there's really one word that kind of works for me with this album. And I wish it was a better word, but I'm going to say that to me, this album is predictable. It's predictable, not necessarily in the sense that you know what you're going to get because it's Metallica, because like Zach alluded to, it's a very different type of album for Metallica. It's a concept album of sorts, but it's predictable because the music doesn't seem, to me at least, to change what it does. So on many of the songs on here, what I hear is Lars pounding a snare drum and the riffing from both James and Kurt just kind of following Lars. And it kind of takes its toll on me for a while, or, as the album kind of goes on. So it really is like, I don't know if they necessarily kind of locked in to, this one writing mode and they just couldn't get out of it. But I feel like James, on the other hand, kind of took his time crafting the lyrics to a lot of the different songs, because the lyrics on here are really, really good, in my opinion. One of my favorites from the entire album comes from Shadows Follow, and it's hanging by a thread. My mind is it code red. And that's very, very powerful to me. There are a lot of other moments like that on this album, but I just think that the music on here, at least from a writing perspective, they should have taken a step back edited themselves a little bit and said, you know what, we need to try something a little bit different because there are cool ideas throughout here. They just are done so sporadically that they don't really bring much more flavor to the album. Like in You Must Burn, there's an interesting like echoey vocal that comes around the 4 minute, 10-second mark that I wish they would have explored a little bit further. But it just sounds like they locked into this groove, and that was really it. I mean, granted, you want the album to feel groovy, and you want the album to feel heavy, and you want Rob and Lars to be on the same page. I think they're just on the same page too much. They've got to do something to explore a little bit more. And I feel like when they went to Enamorada, the last track that's 11 minutes, it felt almost like an expanded version of My Friend of Misery from the Black Album. And I find it really funny that they're both kind of talking about James's misery. And it's a really cool moment on the album. I just don't think that there's enough of those cool moments to really make it feel like a Metallica album.
Interesting. Time is locked in.
And fuck it, I lost.
By how much? Wait to find out. Out of 5, ooh, yes. What would you give this?
It's a 3-star album.
Interesting.
It's listenable. It's Metallica. I like it. I just don't feel that it's special enough, right? Like the last time that I really felt like there was a special Metallica album really was Death Magnetic. I remember getting that album, putting it on repeat and letting it play on repeat over and over and over. And I really, really, really enjoyed Death Magnetic. And there's also like the feelings of you can feel Metallica in the album. You can feel that there's a lot of thought that went into it. Like The Day That Never Comes. There's no moment on this album like The Day That Never Comes. Like there's a few songs here and there that you can kind of hear that they might be hearkening back a little bit to like Judas Kiss on like Shadows Follow, but there's not anything else. Like Lux Eterna kind of harkens you back to an early Metallica, but it's not anything really like new. Granted, this is the Metallica on like Lux Eterna 72 Seasons that we wanted and people have wanted for forever. They wanted that old school feel Metallica, and you got it on the singles. But the rest of the album doesn't speak to that. It speaks to this very, like I said, just kind of locked in. Lars pounded on the snares at the end of a phrase and them going back around again. It's like, could you have thought of something else to do? Could there be a different transition?
I'm going to stop you there because I think there's a lot that we're going to discuss after my review too.
Okay.
And also want you to remember what you said about Death Magnetic, because that kind of ties into something I want to bring up and to make you feel old. But with that said, Matt, count me down. I got some thoughts as well.
3, 2, 1, go.
So, well, I can definitely see some feeling that musically, this is a continuation of what they did with Hardwired to Self-Destruct, in that, it's a mixture of Kill 'Em All meets Black Album vibes. I wouldn't use the word predictable. In fact, I actually am more astonished how songs like Screaming Suicide, Shadows Fall, and I'm going to mess up the titles here. What's new, though? Sleepwalk My Life Away actually sound like Kirk and Robert are more involved than they have been in past albums. And when during a time in the past year alone, when a lot of our favorite bands sound like they're coasting, I actually am impressed at how every band member seems like they are in the pocket and just actually sound invigorated and sound like they are committed to just kicking ass and making the best possible album that they could. I got a lot more and Justice for All vibes in that. It just sounds like they have some sort of anger and kick in the pants that they've been missing for a while now. I actually feel like they've gotten more out of their comfort zone and sound more like a band that, rather than trying to be like, oh, we should try to sound like our old early albums, It's like, hey, what actually inspired us, to form a band? Let's try to capture that sound. Let's try to capture the Judas Priest, the Merciful Fate, the Black Sabbath that made us want to kick ass as youngsters too, which goes into the theme of those 18, what music did shaped our 18 years, our first 18 years on Earth. And and even songs that like You Must Burn, that at first kind of like, all right, this is, starts off kind of typical. Kirk just comes in with some riffage that just makes you go, oh, wow, that's interesting. And even just throughout the whole album, even just like Room of Mirrors, just elements that just little intricacies that go, whoa, and where did this come from? Too far gone. I wasn't expecting that chorus, that Judas Priest sounding chorus that just sounded like, whoa, that's a band that literally came to play. But that leads to also, and Matt kind of hinted at this too, the real all-star of this album. And his name is James Hetfield. Not only, I mean, let's be real, this is a concept album that, in the hands of Metallica, who I love for is my favorite band, it really shouldn't work. It works so well. It's because James sounds the most committed to a performance than he's ever has in a long, long time. You just get a sense of vulnerability. It's almost like watching your godlike superhero coming down to be like, hey guys, no, I'm also suffering too. And there's something so special about hearing him on the title track, which is just a kick. I'm sorry, but if you're a diehard Metallica fan, I dare you to look me in the eyes and say that that's not a badass freaking out song. Or even Shadows. I'm going to lose my time. Shadows Follow. I was about to say Shadows Fall. Shadows Follow. Just something about it. His performances just erect some sort of emotion that I haven't heard from James in a while. And it's just for a band at this point in their career who could, like I said, could be coasting, to hear them so committed and sound so passionate. It just makes me, and I'm sure in a year or two, I might find a lot of more flaws in the album. But right now, I am madly in love with 72 Seasons.
All right, we got a time.
Which I'm
And
sure I'm over as well. So it's going to
yeah,
be just more of a who's less over.
yeah. And out of 5 years, how many?
Out of 5 years, I'm close to saying 4.5 stars. I'm leaning towards 4, but at this very second, I'm actually on the fence because, like I mentioned, I'm very sure I will start nitpicking the more I listen to it, the months to come. Kind of like with Hardwired to Self-Destruct. At first, I was like, this is great too. And slowly you're like, oh, this is kind of. I think what impressed me about this album more than Hardwired, or at least at this very moment, is that I was trying to find where they could have cut the fat. Like, you listen to even some of the great moments on Hardwired to Self-Destruct, and there's definitely like, all right, they could have cut this little fat piece off. They could have shaved off a minute or a few seconds here and there. Not as much like I think back to the last 2 Iron Maiden albums, including Senjutsu, that we reviewed, and how, like, those albums had so much freaking fat, like so much, like you could have cut those songs in half and they would have been much better. And so less so with Hardwired to Self-Destruct, but there's still definitely like, all right, they could have totally made, cut off this part. I found myself having a harder time finding the fat on 72 Seasons, at least this first time around. There's definitely songs like, well, Crown of Barbed Wire is probably the only song that I'm like, yeah, that one they could have cut out completely. But then you go to the longest song in Metallica history, Morada, and I'm like, I'm actually impressed with how, like, from start to finish, I'm invested in this.
I was impressed it wasn't an instrumental.
Yeah, I am actually very impressed and pleased with this album. I think this is the energized Metallica that you want at this point in their career.
I'm not disagreeing with you that their energy is what you need. I think that a lot of it has to do with James and his vocals. I think, like, on a song like Shadows Follow, I don't think that it was just about the first 18 years of your life. I really think that that song, hands down, is about James and his demons and how it seems like no matter what he does, he can't shake them, and they're always kind of like creeping back up. Not only, there's a lot of things that happened too. Like, he went back to rehab for a little while.
Yeah,
but I think he got divorced.
But it's tying into how, like, these demons that he's currently facing, it all ties back to the beginning. And it
Uh,
makes him also question, like, it goes to wonder, can you ever change? Can you ever be completely rid of your demons, or do you just have to live with them? So I think it all kind of still ties in together, whether it's him talking more specifically about the current life. And all, I mean, the whole point is that those first 18 years shape your life so much. I was actually even talking to my dad about the concept, and he made a great point about how, it's interesting that during those first 18 years of your life, those seasons seem so memorable. Whereas the older you get, the more everything blends in together.
yeah.
It kind of just highlights how important those 18 years are. But to your point, I think his lyrics are just phenomenal in this album.
Oh
And
yeah.
I would agree that if it wasn't for James Hetfield, both lyrically and performance wise too, this album would have suffered.
I think it would have. See, I think James put in a ton of the work and he shines. And because he shines so much, I don't want to say the music suffers because he's part of it, but I feel like I expect the rest of the album to live up to his performance. And I think that Lars got very, very, very sloppy. Not from
I
like,
disagree.
I,
I feel like,
I,
if anything,
maybe
his
sloppy's not
performance
the right
actually,
word.
well, not maybe sloppy. I actually feel like his performance clearly inspired the rest of the band. I actually think
Mm,
I mean, I think even back to, as much as I liked Hardwire at the time, and I still love certain songs of that album, you definitely can hear, compared to the past work, where it's really the Lars and James show, and Kirk and Rob kind of being like, oh, all right, we'll just do whatever they tell us to. And this album, I really actually feel like, from at least, maybe not necessarily from a creative standpoint, because I admit that, it's definitely, if you look at the first 4 or 5 albums, it's not the same like the same memorable hooks, but it's, from an energy standpoint, I actually think they all bring it. I think
they do. I think I think the right word for Lars's performance is, I think it's uninspired. There's something there that there's just, it sounds the same. Every song, the way that he drums, it sounds the same on here. And I don't want to say it's Lars, like, just, being Lars and not being a great drummer, because that's not the case. It's just the way that he plays on here, it's like he fell back into the same safe zone every song to to transfer the song along. Like there's no like just dead stops where it's like, okay, we can stop here and then let the guitars transfer over to another segment of the song and he can follow and pick up. It's like he's got to be the person to make the transition to every other piece of the song. And that's not right. Like there's
I don't know if uninspired. I admit that maybe his drumming's a little bit more straightforward than on past albums. I don't know if it's uninspired though. I
like
didn't get that sense from it.
like I went back and I listened to Harvester of Sorrow when I was figuring out how I wanted to take this. And one of the things that I noticed, not only that, it's one of the greatest Metallica songs of all time, but there's different layers of things that are happening. And there's different transitions that they're individually doing. Like James is doing his part, and then Lars will come in underneath it with a completely different like rhythm, and it'll eventually mesh and sync up, and it makes that song great. There's nothing like that here. It's like everything is together. Everything is, for lack of a better word, like pieced perfectly together inside of Pro Tools. And they're saying, okay, we want to make sure that when Lars starts pounding on the snare drum, all the guitars follow in exactly the same fashion. There's no separation. There's no alternative layering that happens. Like Lars doesn't go off on his own thing and James doesn't kind of start doing his own little riff, and it doesn't, there's no little interesting moments like that make
So
old Metallica songs great.
I definitely would agree to a certain degree that they're a lot more in the pocket with each other on the same level. I almost kind of like that, because to me it almost feels like I'm watching a band, like an actual band, play together, as opposed to trying to like. Of course, there's lots of amazing things that can happen from just trying to mix different elements or playing styles together. But to me, this is almost the most cohesive sounding that Metallica has sounded in a while, which is where I get the Kill 'Em All vibes. granted, that's one of my favorite albums from Metallica, and maybe that's why I also enjoy this so much. In that, like, it's kind of refreshing that after all these years, Metallica sounds like they actually are enjoying being in the same room together.
And that's not a bad thing by
No,
any
yeah,
stretch of the imagination. Like, I like that they sound really good. It's just the music is predictable. It doesn't sound interesting. Like, maybe because I've been going off on a tangent, and maybe because I love Tool's last album so much, and listening to something like that where it's so complex and it's so just different rhythmically, and the way that everything kind of just meshes together in like the most disjointed way possible, if that makes sense to anybody but
well,
myself.
no,
It's
it does. I think the
This
problem
is
though is
just
that you
too
can't.
regimented.
Well, I think the problem though is that you can't compare Metallica to Tool.
No, I'm not trying to. I'm just saying,
No,
like,
but yeah,
there's the style of the music. It just doesn't ever break. Like, okay, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, snare, 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 snare. 1, 2, 3, 4, snare, 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 snare. And it's like, you got to do something different, man. There's got to be something else that you can bring to this album. Like, I think Lux Eterna is a great, great, great example of that, where it didn't have to be like that. Like, there was like the kick drumming that he was doing on that, and that was incredible. And when they came blazing out with that as the first single, I thought that was the Metallica we were going to get.
so
And I
I actually
feel completely different about the rest of
see.
the album.
I find that fascinating because I actually think, to me, while I get why that was the first single, it's definitely the most old school Metallica sounding. I actually was the least impressed by that song, or at least the least
Really?
impressed by that out of all the singles. To me, that seemed a little that seemed more predictable and straightforward. Whereas you got a song like the title track, and to me, that's actually where I got a lot of Injustice for All. Like, I actually have to disagree with your whole like, oh, there's not different. Like, to me, it's like it starts off like and then goes back to the speed. Like, to me, that has all the different types of tempos that you kind of want, all the different types of intricacies. Even like songs like Too Far Gone, like it starts off like you're thinking it's going to go in a certain straightforward direction, and then it comes in with a chorus that you haven't heard James do in a long time, or really if ever. Like, I think out of all the songs, that was the least interesting one. And to me, it was hearing even a song like Screaming Suicide, not only with the emotional lyrics from James, but like even just the guitar work. And uh, I have to disagree. I actually think Lux Eterna is the least interesting song.
Well, see, it's interesting that you mentioned Too Far Gone, because I wrote down in my notes that that's actually where they introduce some new flavor on the album, and where they do the doubled guitar riff in different octaves. Like, that is
Yeah, I
really
was not
interesting.
prepared for that. I was like, whoa, where did this come from? I'm
Right.
loving this.
The vocal riff that happens around the 3-minute mark, again, another interesting flavor. But why do you only explore it for such a short amount of time? Like, the guitars that they did, I don't think they did for more than maybe 5 or 10 seconds. Like, you could have
No,
played off of that a lot longer.
I disagree. I think they did it the right amount. I think if you start treading it, it becomes a little too fatty. With that said, I do want to bring up one thing though, because we talked a lot. You mentioned about Harvester of Sorrow, and you talked about your experience listening to Hardwired, and to Death Magnetic, and I mentioned about Kill 'Em All. Well, Matt, you ready to feel old? This year, 2023, marks 40 years since Kill 'Em All came out. This year also marks 35 years since And Justice for All came out. This year also marks 20 years since Saint Anger came out. And finally, before you go, stop making me feel old, Zach, this year marks 15 years since Death Magnetic came out. All of these albums played very critical parts in Metallica's career as part of growth. I mean, clearly, Kill 'Em All was the first album, and Justice for All was a big change in Metallica's life, both with losing Cliff, gaining and trying to learn how to live past that tragedy, and to try to bring in a new member who, as Saint Anger proves, failed miserably and caused a huge split. And we can go on and on about Saint Anger and that interesting, let's call it, experiment. And then even Death Magnetic, which is where you making the joke that where Stella got her groove back. They all played critical moments in the band's career. So Matt, I'm going to ask, I think I already know where this is going to go, but if let's say, and Justice for All is at the very top of the list, Kill 'Em All right underneath it, then followed right underneath that, Death Magnetic, and then at the very bottom, Saint Anger. Sorry, Saint Anger. You have some qualities. We all appreciate you for what you are, but let's be real, you're at the bottom. Among those four albums, from top to bottom, where would you place 72 Seasons?
Let's see. Definitely not number one.
Well, yeah.
Okay. I think your list is going to have to change for me. So we're going to go.
You're about to put Death Magnetic above Kill 'Em All?
Maybe.
You shut your mouth. You shut your whore mouth.
And Justice for All.
Oh, you shut your whore mouth.
I think number two for me would have to be Death Magnetic.
You put Death Magnetic that above Kill 'Em All?
72 Seasons, Kill 'Em All.
Whoa,
Saint Anger.
hold on. Whoa, now.
I've told you my opinions. I've told you my opinions on Kill 'Em All in the past.
Listen to a past episode of You Have to Pick Three where we debate the best debut albums of all time to learn more. But whoa.
Yeah. And
so I was not prepared for this because I also figured the way that you were talking about 72 Seasons that like it was going to be much lower. First off, I'm shocked about you having Death Magnetic that above Kill 'Em All, but to have 72 Seasons above Kill 'Em All.
Yep. I think that Metallica didn't really start being Metallica until Ride the Lightning. That's when it really sounded like James and the guys really started to gel and groove well together. And a lot of bands have that moment on like their first album, like they're this thrash band, they come out, they're really heavy, and then then they're kind of lackluster, right? Like Trivium, what I think was another great example that I brought up in that past episode, where Ascendancy was amazing, and then the Crusade happened. It just proves that was a baby step in Metallica's career, that Kill 'Em All was this young, hungry band that came out, and I don't think that every song on there is great, but they did have a lot of really killer songs, and they showed a lot of promise, and then they took that and honed their skills and put out a huge album in Ride the Lightning, where they could have fallen down and they could have released a Saint Anger on their second album, but they didn't. So I think that Ride the Lightning is the true start of Metallica. That's just me. But and Justice for All, it's a hugely classic album. It shaped a lot of bands' sounds. It really felt like another truly special moment, especially coming
it legitimized what Master of Puppets really first
Master of Puppets, 100% the ultimate classic from Metallica. But
and then Justice for All is classic, like just justified, like, yep, this is the band.
They locked in that they were the band and that they didn't have to do the same thing over and over and over again.
So,
which is why I think I'm kind of that thought process is kind of what jades me into 72 Seasons, because to me it just sounds a lot like the same thing over and over and over again. But going back, and why Death Magnetic is so high is because Death Magnetic, I feel like, was the first time that Metallica recaptured that type of feeling and type of sound where, it wasn't like it wasn't a Master of Puppets, it wasn't an Injustice for All, it was its own unique Metallica flavor that added something to the catalog that they haven't done before. And I feel like they harken back to what they were with a song like The Day That Never Comes, but then they explored other realms like Broken Beating, Scarred, or why am I blanking on the title? Not the title track, the first track on the album.
That Was Just Your Life?
Yes. I feel like that was like the statement to bring them back to life.
Well, and let me, if you don't mind, I'd like to propose some alternative views. So in my ranking, yes, number one, and Justice for All. Number 2, Kill 'Em All. I'm sorry, but that, I think that is one of the best debuts of all time. I think, sure, they evolved drastically with Ride the Lightning, but they wouldn't have been able to make that evolution without Kill 'Em All. And for a band that was able to, I'm sorry, but every song on that album is phenomenal. And the performances from such a young band on that record, the songs still slap. The songs still just produce some sort of raw emotion that just still translates well for me to this day. Number 3.
So tell me how you're not the old drunk guy at Metallica screaming at them to play Phantom Lord?
Because I appreciate all the music too. I appreciate how they evolved, but I still love that album. Number 3, this is where we're going to get a little duking it out here. I'm going to put 72 Seasons at number 3 over Death Magnetic by a hair. Because as much as I do love the album Death Magnetic, Cyanide is a damn great song that has Rob's bass playing all over it. But to me, well, first, let's be real. The production on 72 Seasons is far superior than Death Magnetic.
Yes.
So that's a big bonus for 72 Seasons. But again, I love Death Magnetic, but to me, Death Magnetic is the band going, you know what? We really, went in a weird direction of Saint Anger. Like we were already like losing sight of the old school sound because they were feeling the pressure of recapturing what they sounded like on the first 4 albums. Let's try to do that again with Death Magnetic. Whereas with 72 Seasons, it didn't feel like let's try to recapture what we sounded like, but rather and this is where you hear the Judas Priest, the Merciful Fate, and Black Sabbath influences. To me, it really was hey, what inspired us during those first 18 years of our lives musically? What lit a fire under our asses then, as opposed to, all right, let's just make an album that sounds like what old school fans expect from us. And to me, that's what I appreciate about 72 Seasons, is that it really does sound like a band that is trying to look into the future while also reflect back on what made them the men that they are today, which is kind of what the concept is in theory. So that's what gives 72 Seasons for me the edge. And granted, I admit that it is very possible that this time next year, I might have different feelings about 72 Seasons, because that's also a big.
Oh, what are you putting? You putting an asterisk next to it? Oh, I reserve the right to change my mind at any time.
So this is fair. It is kind of copping out. No, but admittedly, that's kind of the problem sometimes with reviewing an album like this that's been so hyped up, in that sometimes you get, part of it, like sometimes the wanderlust of just, oh wow, this is amazing, it quickly fades off. Sometimes it's, no, this song still is amazing. Like definitely with Hardwired to Self-Destruct, the more I listen to it, the more I go, you know what, yeah, this song definitely could, yeah, the production wasn't as great as I remembered it being the first time around. Or even with Hardwired to Self-Destruct, it's like, you know what, no, Halo on Fire is still an amazing song. You know what, no, Spit Out the Bone is still incredible. Where so I don't know if I'm going to have this, I don't know if I'm going to start finding more flaws in this album yet, but right now 72 Seasons it has the edge over Death Magnetic. And I'm sorry, Saint Anger, thank you for showing up for the party anyway, but I feel so sad for Saint Anger to be at it's one of those, well, of course it's going to be at the bottom.
Well, I mean, it is 2023. Everybody gets a participation award at this point. So here you go.
Just to harp on the fact that we're feeling old. Can you believe it's been 20 years since Saint Anger came out? Or it's been about 20 years?
I feel older hearing what you said about Death Magnetic than Saint Anger.
I mean, yeah, that's fair too. But
Saint Anger, I can remember where I was when I bought the album. And I remember that it came out, the day that it came out. Drove myself over to Best Buy, picked up the album, put it in my CD player, and listened to it, and immediately wondered why they decided to play on trash cans.
I mean,
I was hoping I remember hoping as I was driving away from Best Buy, I'm like, uh-oh, is this going to be on the whole album or is it just this song? And then I got to the next song and said, oh no, all right, maybe they did it on 2.
I mean,
and then went to the next song.
Not to hop on too much of it too, because I mean, we discussed the album, but also Some Kind of Monster, the documentary chronicling the making of it, on our good friend Daniel's podcast, Far Beyond Metal, when we just revisited the movie, and that made me feel really old too. I appreciate what they were trying to do on that album, and I do stand by also what I've said in some other past episodes, that if they had made some different production choices and maybe even some different arrangements, it would be a much better album. But it's also an album that they needed to make at the time, given everything that they were going through at that point.
They should have used a different snare drum.
They should have added a few guitar solos too. There's a lot of they should haves, which is why, admittedly, with Death Magnetic and even Hardwire and 72 Seasons, it's refreshing to have less of those, oh, they should haves. There's still a few like, oh, they should have done this or they should have done that. But it's for, I mentioned this before, I'll call out some more examples, but like Iron Maiden, Red Hot Chili Peppers, the last few albums they both released, you just go, God, they need someone to fucking tell them to stop or to do that. Like, they're just doing whatever, like you want to talk about being in comfort zones. Those bands were just way into comfort zones. So to hear Metallica at least sound like they're trying to push themselves, whether it's lyrically or just energy wise, it's refreshing to hear.
Yeah. And nobody's denying that Metallica still sounds good on this. I think
that's a huge compliment though in general, because you can make arguments that like one of the biggest gripes, one of the biggest problems that fans have had is the production. And here I actually think it's the best sounding Metallica album in a long time.
Correct. And I will wholeheartedly agree with that, because Metallica since Saint Anger has always been the band that everybody kind of points the finger at and says, you didn't do this right, or you didn't do that right, or why did your sound engineer get the mix before it was final mix and it was a complete brick of a job, or why the hell did you guys choose to sound like a garage band when you're a multi-million-dollar band and you can afford the best? It's like they've had those finger pointing moments over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And here I like that you can't point the finger at that. And I actually think, and I don't know why this is, I'm going to check my speaker setup in here, but the speakers on my desk sounded worse than the speakers in my car. And that says a lot, because usually that's reversed. So I wonder where they mixed the album for, if it was for like on the go mobile type stuff, or was it for sitting down and listening to it? I'm like, this sounds very different, but I'm not going to harp on it because it still sounds really damn good.
Yeah.
And
agreed.
And the band needs to, if they're going to make another album, and I'm going to say this, being a Metallica fan my whole life, like if they're going to make another album that needs to sound like this, maybe back off the production a hair and not make it sound so like crisp and clean, and just make it a little bit more dirty and gritty. And I think it's fine. But I mean, if they don't, it's great. If they do, back off, it'll be great too. But I think they finally found a happy place to live.
I almost would much prefer if they do one more. I mean, because it sounds like Lars is like, listen, I'd love for us to at least have 10 more years left. If they do another album, I almost would rather
2 Metallica albums.
Well, depends. I mean, it took 8 years in between. Was it 8 years? I can't do math. At least 8 years in between Death Magnetic and Hardwired.
That was 8 years.
So,
but then again, they had that stopgap at Lulu. I mean, they had to put some energy into it. And
did they though? Because if you listen to it,
Lars stands behind it. It's like, it aged so great, man. It was a great album.
I would rather hear an acoustic Metallica album, or maybe even like a more orchestra, which is actually, if you think about it, for the amount of
you want S&M3.
Well, not even S&M 3, but even like, what if they actually did an album with an orchestra of all original stuff? Like, and they ended almost like cinematic that way.
I mean, I don't disagree with the concept. I mean, I loved what they did on the first one with No Leaf Clover and Human or Minus Human or whatever you want to call it. But those are two really good songs.
Yeah. Even what they did with the rearrangement of All Within My Hands. Like the way that, like, to me,
that
that's
came
incredible.
together really great. They took a pile of garbage and actually turned it into one of their signature songs.
Yeah. So
I think if you did like an S&M 3, it should be the next album and then finish off with that Angry album just to kind of end cap your career.
I don't know if they need to, though. Again, like, they've done enough angry sounding albums.
You can never have too much angry Metallica, though.
Fair enough. But you know what, Matt? None of that matters, does it? Nothing else matters.
I'm going to say that it does matter because the scores, they suck this time around.
Well, first off, before everyone goes, why is it called 2 Minutes Review when it's an hour episode? We never promised the length of the episode, but here we also kind of failed in that. Like, the assignment was whoever gives the longest review in under 2 minutes. Yeah, I think we all failed. So let's find out how bad we did. Matt, if this episode was called 3 Minutes to Review, you would still lose. Because you came in at 3 minutes and 3 seconds.
Well, that means that I technically won. You came in 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
No, I didn't. Wow.
Yeah, you did.
Just like how this is one of Metallica's longest albums, this is probably one of our longest reviews.
I mean, it's of Metallica, and it's always going to be long when we talk Metallica.
Well, there's a reason why I did a count, and we've done more episodes where we've mentioned Metallica's name than any other band.
We're fans of Metallica. We're spending an entire weekend listening to Metallica.
So yeah, if you want to know where we're going to be during the second week or first weekend of August, we'll be at MetLife.
Yeah, we'll be at MetLife.
Come
listening to both sets of Metallica.
Yeah. As long as no kids get sick. Well, one of us will be there for sure. But let us know after you just heard us do a lot of vomiting about Metallica. Do you agree with us? Do you think this is one of Metallica's best albums in a long, long time? Or is it another stinker for Metallica? Let us know on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Epic Footnote. Also, a little teaser here. Go to our TikTok at Epic Footnote to see me unbox the Target exclusive Smoke Red and Black Marbled Vinyl edition of 72 Season. Indie record stores, I'm so sorry. I know I betrayed you by going to Target to buy an album on vinyl instead. I'm sorry, but it is such a cool variant and it's also not cool. So go to TikTok to see me unbox that cool piece of vinyl and subscribe to our YouTube channel to hear, like we mentioned, a crap ton of other episodes featuring Metallica, plus a few other artists, a few other favorite bands. And a massive thank you to Lucky 13 Beard Co.
Log on to lucky13beardco.com and make sure that you check out all of the amazing beard balms and oils that Ed and the guys have over there if you want to feel the best that you can feel and smell the most epic that you can smell, because we've got our own beard balm and oil with them. It is the Lemmy, everything that Lemmy from Motorhead was all about: bourbon, tobacco, cola, and leather. You can even argue the guys Metallica should use it because they were inspired by Motorhead. Log on there and you can get 10% off anything that you put into your cart. Use the code EFP10 at checkout. Lucky13, the number beardco.com, EFP10, anything in your cart, 10% off. Lucky13, the number beardco.com.
Ed, Lucky 13 Beard Co. Get some beard oil for Metallica. Ship it over to them in San Francisco. Do it. And also go to our Linktree website, as I mentioned earlier, where you'll find not only links to every streaming platform that we're on in case you want to listen to other episodes. If you decide at the last minute, I don't want to be on Spotify anymore, I'm going to Apple Music. You can find us there. And you'll also find a link to our web store where you will find hats, t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs with our logo on it. It's a great way to not only support us so that we can continue doing episodes like this, but to also self-promote us so that you can let other people know that you listen to really cool podcasts.
That's what all the cool kids are doing.
It is. Like I've literally just saw a cool group of cool kids just going, yeah, Epic Footnote. I don't know. But thanks so much for listening. And we hope you join us for another episode real soon.
Ooh, yeah.